Federico. I think I speak from here. Maybe it's better. My name is Stefano Da Empoli, and yeah, as Federico was saying, I'm moderating this panel that basically presents, I mean, the GTIPA effort and its think tanks effort to convey some practical examples of deregulation that spur innovation and hopefully growth in our countries. Of course, I mean, it's still fresh, I mean, what Argentina is doing. There are very interesting cases also in Argentina. They are interesting also because some of them refer to Milei government experience, but some of them come back to past experiences. And of course, in the deregulation movement was started in the 70s in the US, especially in the US and in the UK, and I mean, received. I mean, was driven in all these decades, especially in the report, reminds it by the OECD efforts with many recommendations. Unfortunately, only some of these recommendations were, I mean, implemented in the OECD countries. In the meantime, of course, and it's also something that comes up here, especially from the 90s in Eastern Europe, of course, but also in Latin America, especially, there were efforts and very important deregulation attempts. But I mean, of course, I would leave the floor to practical cases and what is behind in terms of thoughts, especially also looking at the looking forward to the great discussants in this panel. So I call Małgorzata Bonikowska from Poland. I call I don't see him, but he's I think somewhere. Mario Ottero Cricco. Okay, you were far away, but not too far. From Argentina. And then we have Natalia Gonzalez from Chile, Luis Loria from Costa Rica, and John Paulo from Rivera, of course, from Philippines. Yeah, John Paulo. Maybe we have, yeah, we can have another chair from there. I would start from Mario, also because I mean, we are hosted here in Argentina, and we have actually 6 cases. I mean, from Argentina. You wanted to impress us, but it's interesting this because 3 of them are refer to what Milei is doing, while your part, the part that you wrote, was more on things that were done in the past, and some cases also were reviewed by Milei. So it's interesting to have your very, very short. I mean, we try to do 3 rounds, but we do that. We can do that if you are very, very short and on the point. Please, Mario.
Yes. First of all, I would say that overregulation is not something that happens just in Argentina. It's all over the world. Just in case, we saw the picture of more than 2 kilos of regulation for just one thing. But for example, in the US, the US code for federal regulation, it's over 170,000 pages. So you would need like a PhD just to read that part. But one of the things that happens with overregulation is it doesn't only slow the growth, but it also limits or distorts the effect of the Schumpeterian process of creative destruction. And that's something really important because it allows companies that are not longer competitive to still be in place. And another example that happens that it's also, I would like to mention because it's very relevant to Argentina, is the case that it increased informality. So there are like a lot of industries, for example, textile or construction, that in Argentina, over 70% of it is completely informal. And I mean, it makes sense. If you have a business, if you want to start, and you have to read all those regulations, you are not going to do it. So you start like working, and the problem is that then the government can ask you things that, of course, you are not complying. I saw the example that they gave about the watermelon last in the spring meetings with Federico was in the IDB. And in my case, what actually surprised me was not like the amount of regulation that was there, but the privilege that were embedded on them. So I think that one thing that we need to think when we are like talking about deregulation is all the privilege that are in those regulations. So there are a lot of monopolies there. And for example, in the case of the watermelon, there were certain industries created just to provide the boxes, to do the exports and everything. So that's one of the things that I would like to say, that it's really important. If you want, I can give you all the places.
Yeah, it's so thanks. So we save some minutes. I would pass to your neighbor, not only on the table, but as a country, I mean, representative of Chile, neighbor, Argentina's neighbor. What was the assessment in, I mean, of the Chilean situation, and also coming up from the cases that were brought?
Thank you, Stefano. Perhaps I can take you to a little journey for more than a decade ago, where Chile was actually regulating or deregulating in favor of people, of entrepreneurship, considering their interests. And I would say until 2014, more or less, Chile was like a beacon in Latin America of the promotion of freedom and entrepreneurship. And among the cases that we highlighted in the report, there are three cases in which it's a combination of smart regulation and smart deregulation. Through these cases, not only consumer choice freedom was promoted, but also barriers of entry to certain markets were diminished, and the competition was actually boosted in those markets. And I'm talking about the financial market, the telecommunications market, and also the possibility for entrepreneurs to create new companies. So the three cases that are exposed in the report have to do with opening actually these markets. How did we do it? For example, in the telecom market, there was a law passed for number portability. What does that mean? It means that if you are in a company and you're not happy with the services that the company is providing, or you're not happy with the prices that the company is offering you, then you can switch to another telecom company, but maintaining your telephone number. And also, certain tying agreements that were allowed in previous law were now forbidden, and costs were diminished for the change. So people were actually changing companies. And when you look at the numbers, because we always say that we unlock freedom, that we promote innovation with this kind of regulations, that we transform lives, let's see the data, you know? And in the case of number portability, in the first year, we had 3.1% of users switching, but then in 2017, the number soared to 19.6%. And today, it has stable in around 13 to 14% of people switching. But this is not only about consumer freedom of choice, but also about opening the market. New entrants were able to challenge the current actors of the market, because for now people could switch to that company, maintaining their phone number and diminishing costs. So for example, new companies entered the market, the telecom market in Chile after this reform, like WOM, for example. Another case similar to this one was the financial portability. This was passed on 2020, and financial portability, what does it do? It actually diminishes, again, for consumers, costs for switching either a financial institution or changing products within the financial institution or with other financial institution. So what are we doing here? There's a common, somehow, system, a centralized system, in which if you as a consumer wish to change your current account, your savings account, or other types of products, credits, for example, that you would have hired with a bank, now the two banks will enter into conversations. You go to the bank that you want to go, for example, or the financial institution that you want to switch or change, and that bank will, like, through a mandate, do all the diligences for you. And it's very quick, again, diminishing costs, again, diminishing diligences that consumers must do. And the legal figure behind is like a legal subrogation. You know, you don't have to cancel the former mortgage, pay the costs, hire a new credit and a new mortgage, but they will just subrogate in the roles. And again, the data shows that in fact we're impacting the life of the consumers. So, for example, refinancing rates jumped from 17.9% to 19.5% just in the first year. And if you consider not only procedural and pecuniary costs involved, if you consider also cognitive costs involved, because information here is also a very important piece of this reform, potential gains could go until to 28.6%. So it has got a great impact. On 2023, 201,000 cases of portability requests were made, and on 2024, around 165,000 cases. So again, impacting the lives of people, refinancing credits in better terms, and pushing banks and financial institutions to offer better conditions to the consumers. And the last case I would like to mention is the company in a day, as we used to call it in Chile. This is a law that what it did was simplify the process for creating companies in Chile through a digital platform where you can not only create the company, you can create, you can amend, you can merge with other companies, and where you can obtain your initiation of activities and also obtain your ID tax number to operate. And this is amazing because before that, you would have to go through a series of diligences, go to notary publics, go to real estate offices, and now this is all in a digital platform, which diminished timing from around 27 days to in a day or 5 days. So people are creating companies in a record time, which makes entrepreneurs' lives easier. You know, sometimes you can create a company and you can have success in your business, but sometimes you don't and you fail. And the fact that you are failing, but that you can create easily or you can stand up easily again in a few times without having to deal with a lot of permits, it's amazing. So actually, those are the rates that we're evidencing in the data. By 2024, 89.5% of new businesses in Chile were using actually this new system, cutting the average startup time from 27 days to 5.5 days. So this is especially important for women entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs, which somehow have been excluded from traditional markets. So having this possibility is really amazing, and the data is showing us. I don't want to say that we have all the way ahead already done. Chile, as I said, in the last decade has entered into a stagnant period. We have a lot of challenges, and we're going to talk about that in the next questions. Thank you.
Thanks, thanks, Natalia. Luis, got my attention, of course, the revolutionary sandbox, and that actually comes from a study that you conducted a few years ago. And can you tell us a little bit more about the process that brought the so-called revolutionary sandbox, and of course, very shortly, what this revolutionary sandbox is?
Okay. Yes.
Costa Rica, of course.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you, and well, I'm happy to be here, and thank you for being in the audience. Well, this regulatory, the revolutionary sandbox that is one of the case studies that we included in the report, has its origin in a study that we conducted with the support of the British Embassy in Costa Rica, where we studied the blockchain and fintech ecosystems. And one thing that we found out after talking with different entrepreneurs in Costa Rica, is that they believed that local regulation was not an obstacle for innovation because they were not, their innovations were not directed to the local markets. They were looking for the global markets. And but in any case, we studied how the blockchain and fintech firms emerged in different under different settings, and we studied the regulatory sandboxes that exist in different countries where they have a common law. We don't have a common law in Costa Rica, and we don't have common law in most Latin American countries. And what that means is that the person that is in charge of regulation cannot tell a specific firm or a specific group of firms that the law will not apply to them during the next 6 months while you experiment on a particular technology. They would go to jail if they do that. So we had to look for an alternative, and the best match that we could find in the literature was from Professor C.K. Prahalat, where he proposed an innovation sandbox. So we took that model and added a few elements that we thought were necessary to shoot for really revolutionary innovation based in Latin America, where we would create a space, not necessarily a physical space, but it could be a virtual space, where firms, a cohort of firms would enter the sandbox, and they would have certain characteristics. They would need to have the ambition to compete at the global level, top-class solutions, and once the firms that enter in the sandbox, they would receive basically all the necessary support to make them competitive at the global level, including connections with international law firms that could help them make IPOs. For example, if you're a science-based firm, then you could have a scientific advisory board with people, say, from MIT or Cambridge, Oxford. So basically, everything that you need to get connected and compete at the global level. And basically, that's the proposal that came out of that study.
Thanks, Luis. I would cross continents, go into John Paulo Rivera, and tell us about Philippines.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And I would just like to share that the deregulation in the Philippines have actually evolved from restriction, and that's what Natalia has mentioned earlier, in smart deregulation. But we're also moving towards smart liberalization in such a way that the Philippines has actually relaxed many of its constitutional restrictions related to foreign investments in critical sectors in the Philippines, like telecommunications and transportation. And with smart liberalization, with these constitutional restrictions being eliminated, foreigners or non-Filipinos are now able to put in investment, 100% investments on this infrastructure, on these telecommunication sectors, instead of the usual just 60%, or rather 40%, wherein the 60% would have to be by a Filipino. And liberalizing the market for that actually allowed for better infrastructure, for faster delivery of infrastructure and telecommunications that actually benefited three particular sectors. Number one is telecommunications. The second one is our information and communication technology business process management, or the business process outsourcing. And number three would be tourism. In addition to this relaxing of the constitutional constraints, we are also benefiting from certain legislation that allowed for incentives, particularly for non-Filipinos, to put in money, to put in investments in the Philippines. And this one can come in the form of income tax holidays, exemptions from additional payments to the government, which would invite many foreign investors actually put in money, because there is now a facilitating ecosystem for them to contribute to infrastructure development in the country brought about by smart deregulation and smart liberalization.
Thanks a lot, JP. I mean, we have now the Polish example, and you reviewed in your contribution, Małgorzata, I mean, the three policy reforms of the put in place by the current government. So please tell us in few minutes.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for inviting us to this panel. Actually, I was very impressed by what we've heard this morning about Argentina. It's really amazing. The case like that was partly an ambition also in my country, and I think it's high time to implement it in all the European Union. I know we have 27 member states. Poland is one of them. Italy is another one. You are the older brother, let's call it, over 70 years in the European project, while Poland is only 20. But during these 20 years, we over-regulated so many things. It is a Brussels effect, maybe, also in case of our country. Earlier, we used to have a lot of regulations concerning especially business activities, but we started quite late with the private business and open market economy. In '89, we went out of the Soviet bloc, so earlier was a completely different world for us. It was a centrally planning economy. So in a relatively few years, we were able to produce a lot of documents for the business, which started to be a problem. Because in the 90s, Poland, we started at the level of more or less the same like Ukraine, but Poland was incredibly, was developing very fast through a huge package of reforms, but one of them was just a simple regulation. It was just, everything was really kind of possible. And that was a boost for private companies and innovations. And this is one of the reasons we were able to succeed so much that we not only entered the European Union, but also this year we became the 20th largest world economy. It's very much thanks to the hard work of Polish entrepreneurs, but it's also because, at least at the beginning, in the first 2 decades, the state was not creating too many obstacles. But once we entered the EU, we unfortunately started to produce a lot of new regulations also following the EU laws. You know that more or less 85% of all the regulations in the EU countries are produced at the Brussels levels first, and then we have to implement it. So for us, it's a lot of, it does matter what Brussels is doing. What does matter what the European Parliament, European Commission, the EU Council all together create as a business environment and as generally a legal base for all our activities. So Poland followed, and we over-regulated many areas. So we even created a special ministry for the EU funds, and because we wanted to use the EU funds, we started to produce so many regulations to do it properly that we started to call this ministry Ministry of Regulations. While I saw on the board that that's a Ministry of Deregulation in Argentina, and we don't have that ministry now, but I think we really need it. And what we've done recently, it's the last 5 years, there was 5 or maybe a decade, there was a constant pressure from the entrepreneurs circles, and especially Polish companies who in the meantime have grown and started to be really well presented not only at the EU market but also elsewhere, that they start to be suffocated, that they feel that they cannot really develop more, while in the same time they need to do that because our Polish market is not big enough, 40 million people, and the EU market is already also saturated and stagnating. So in order to go out of the EU to Asia, Latin America, Africa, we need to be more free. And three things we describe in our report. Please just consult it, but I don't want to talk about that because I want to talk about something we did not put in the report because it is so recent. And it was an initiative given, created or initiated by entrepreneurship circles in Poland. And it was so pushy to push our prime minister to say, okay, you push me so much, okay, just do it then. And one of the leading Polish entrepreneurs became a face and a leader of deregulation initiative. We started to call him Polish Elon Musk because it was quite similar to what at least was announced that Elon Musk wanted to do. But we did it in a different way, more civilized way, I hope. And it's all happened in relatively few months. And this circles of business guys, once they started to do it, I think they realized it's so difficult. So they jumped into the administration with really a very kind of clear idea, oh, we will do it very quickly, you know, in a month. And then they faced an administration culture which is so difficult to overcome or to change that they not gave up, but they stopped this effort already. So it was something we started recently, but also it was finished after a few months. What was an outcome of this initiative? Well, several very good things, and somebody asked about recommendations. I think this Polish case could be also a recommendation for some other countries. First, it was put out of the political debate, aside, that everybody agreed that the regulation is needed. So no politicians were involved in the analysis. Second, the business leaders of many companies jump in and send proposals. What has to be regulated? So it was something like 15,000 different suggestions. What really has to be done, coming from a very practical observations, right? But obviously, among these decent comments, there were also many recommendations resulting from business needs. So they had to be analyzed and put aside because this was not to fix the business needs of business companies or business sectors. This was an initiative to deregulate. So a lot of these proposals were not really implemented because they were seen as lobbying, right? But the third thing which happened, which was very good, that this group of entrepreneurs and business leaders was in a very good relation with the prime minister, who decided, yes, we want to implement at least a part of these proposals. So out of all these 15,000, there were concrete, something like 100 pieces of legislation prepared, but only 40 were implemented as of now in a relatively short time. So the lesson comes from this example is that it is very good when you can directly build a bridge between the leaders, political leaders, and the business leaders, because not necessarily the political leaders would even realize what to do, but it has to be a political will. It is above the administration. The administration would not deregulate. The administration is not interested in the regulation, and it's not fully understanding the process, because the mentality of civil servants, and this was also commented in the previous speech, that it's to regulate a certain sector in order to have a more sophisticated function of the sector from the administration point of view, not really realizing how many problems and how high the costs could be of the implementation of all these regulations. In European Union, we always quote at that moment example of the bottle. You've heard about that.
Yeah.
We have this regulation about the bottles that we cannot just have it like this
Yeah.
anymore in the EU.
Yeah.
It has to be attached. It has to be attached, because if it's not attached, these elements could be spread out, and it is more problem with the plastic. So the bureaucrats in Brussels thought that it is a good idea because it creates just one package of plastic. But they didn't realize the bad effect of this regulation, which was, number one, that it's not really comfortable. Try to drink from a bottle like this with this cork attached. And so people hate it. All the Europeans hate it. And second, the cost for the producer of whatever is in the bottle is very, very high. It was extra machinery needed, extra, a nightmare. So the positive elements of these regulations are not really worth implementing, because the negative costs were higher. So just to conclude, the bridge between the business from practical point of view and the leaders of political leaders is very important to push the administration to calm down and reduce certain aspirations to regulate a lot of things. And in a way, we are trying to do the same at the European Union level. But the weakness at the European Union level is that we don't have really very strong political leadership. So the EU is led by the bureaucrats. And that is why the efforts are not effective so much. Thank you.
Yeah, but thanks, Margherita. Many interesting things. Unfortunately, we are behind schedule, so we have to revise the plan, the initial plan of 3 rounds. There is just 1, 2 minutes at most for each of you for the final question. And I would ask you which is the regulatory reform that shouldn't be missed by your respective countries. In the case of Malgorzata, of course, or even the European Union. Please. We can start, from JP.
Political reform that should not be delayed or should not be missed by most economies, particularly developing economies like the Philippines, would be the continued monitoring that liberalization and deregulation outcomes are actually being implemented. Because the problem usually would be the unevenness of deregulation and liberalization, particularly between the national level and at the local level. Most of the time, there are actually hesitations between and among local governments at the lower levels of governance because of the lack of training, the lack of familiarity, and the way that the national policies are actually being cascaded to the local governments. So this hesitation actually impedes deregulation and liberalization because they actually still impose quote-unquote local regulation or domestic regulations at the local level that actually misses the point of why the national level actually imposes such deregulation and liberalization. And this unevenness, the mismatch that impedes this deregulation is actually making the attractiveness of certain areas in a particular economy less attractive to foreign investment, even to local investment. That's why the continuous enforcement, monitoring that the regulation and liberalization are being implemented well would have to come, no? Would have to be done by the national government. And training is also very important, particularly for local governments, so that they have an idea or they are in a better position to implement national policies.
Thanks, John Paulo. Natalia.
Stefano, very challenging question because, as I was saying in the introduction of my presentation, over the last decade, there's a wave of creeping regulations and permits in Chile growing on that are stifling innovation and progress. And but fortunately, political waves and political will is changing in Chile. After the rejection of the constitutional proposal in 2022, which was a very refoundational and degrowth promoting regulation, new winds have entered the society and the politicians in Chile. And I think there's a good opportunity now. Hard to choose just one, but I would just mention a few. We certainly need a tax reform. We have a corporate tax rate that it's above the average of the OECD. That makes no sense. We need to improve our environmental regulations, not only full of permits and full of obstacles, but also it's very circular. You can get a permit and then you go to the judiciary and then you can go back to the beginning, trying to amend what the judiciary said that you should do to get again the permit or the will of the society. So we need to amend that and amend the participatory process among that. I would say education. Really, the latter reforms in the past decade in Chile, especially regarding public education, have affected not only the quality of that education, but also I would also say that the scale of the amount of people that are receiving a very bad education in Chile today is worrying. And it's especially worrying where we're facing a digital economy moment, where we're facing a revolution, and we need people that are, young people that are prepared to deal with the digitalization, to deal with the artificial intelligence, skill them up so that they can be more productive instead of thinking that they will be replaced by these new technologies, but how to work with these technologies. And we're far behind that, you know, not only skilling them up in these new tools, but in basic math skills, language skills, critical thinking skills, which are, I think, essential for what is coming. So I would say that tax, environment, education, which in turn, I guess, will have an impact in our labor markets that are very, very depressed. Thank you.
Thanks. Mario.
Well, in the case of Argentina, there are like many things that we would like to see. But if I had to mention
maybe there is not much left.
No, but there is one that I think is particularly important, that we need sustainability. We need actually have like a policy and continue for several years. So what they are doing with the Ministry of the Regulation is very important, but if the government change, it should continue.
Yeah.
We cannot change every time that the government changes 100 degrees the policy. So that's something we really need in Argentina. And also to think that it's not a match, it's not Boca River. We don't have to think about it like in the short term. It's important to say, okay, we are all Argentinians and we should go to the same goal. So that is something that I would like to see here.
Thanks, Mario. Aldorzata?
Well, at the EU level, I guess the most important is reduction of numbers of pieces of legislation and, limitation of producing new. So we have this initiative, if you produce one new act, 2 others have to be cancelled, just to reduce it. It's just too much. We are talking about millions. European project started in the 50s, and it is mainly about economy. So you can imagine.
And it's not only important for Europe, because, for example, countries in Latin America are imitating a lot of the laws that come from
exactly
the so-called Brussels.
So it strikes me, that the situation of my own country, which, as I stress, we entered the EU being quite creative and innovative ourselves because we had to, because we were under a total revolution, from centrally planning economy into capitalism and free market. It was very difficult. So it strikes me that now Argentina and Poland, we are in a way at the same page. I mean, that we have to reduce now because something wrong happened somewhere. in the last 2 decades, at least 1 decade. So we need maybe something like your reform at the same time. And in Poland, a lot of things results from, as you mentioned, instability. So every single new government, new idea and new policies, and about lack of clarity from the politicians where they want to really go, and complications, a lot of complications. So in Polish case, for example, tax system, it is so complicated that we have to just simplify it, just like that. But I think it's, in the same time, the bureaucracy is so deeply rooted in the mentality of the Europeans, and we are also an example of that, that it's a constant struggle with bureaucrats also, because there are a lot of voices in the EU, and maybe we could discuss it, what is about Argentina, that certain things need regulations, like AI. It's a very hot topic in Europe. I mean, we cannot just let it go like that, because it could be counterproductive. So certain regulations are needed, but where is this golden line? I think here is the problem.
Luis?
Thank you. Well, as many of you know, Costa Rica is a natural paradise. It's an island of peace, but it is also a regulatory hell. So our priority is the regulation, and we have a proposal that we're actually going to launch in a couple of weeks, which uses collective intelligence and open innovation. It is called, it has an interesting name, No Me Jodas, Don't Bother Me. And so the purpose is to eliminate institutional and regulatory obstacles that make it difficult, costly, or impossible for individuals or firms to work, to conduct productive activities in Costa Rica. And we will launch an internet-based platform, ask the citizens for their input. Then we will apply artificial intelligence to look for similar problems around the globe and the solutions that were applied to those problems, add additional context, and then invite the experts to collaborate in the design of the concrete proposals for solutions with objectives, activities, timelines, budgets. And after, in a second stage, we would launch another initiative. It's called Liderar tu Revolución, Lead Your Revolution, where we would invite groups of citizens to receive training and mentorship so they can champion the implementation of the solutions.
Thanks, Luis. I think we don't have the time for questions and so on. We have some time? Okay. I think we need to wait with, there is also Zoltan over there.
Has any nation or region, I'm looking at you, European Union, ever become an innovation superpower through regulation? There's an easy answer to this one.
That's maybe a question to a historian, but I would say it's not a problem of regulations per se. It's a problem of when and how much you regulate. Because, for example, the example of European Union, it could be also a good example, because European Union's soft power resulted very much from good regulations done at the right moment for the right cause. And also, certain projects need a legal base. For example, when we implemented euro as a currency, there was a lot of regulations needed, but also it was a push from above. And altogether, we have to say it was a successful idea. Until today, euro, in a relatively short time of 2 decades, became a global currency, comparable, I mean, strong enough to be one of the leading currency of the world. So you could not do such projects without regulations. But on the other side, I think the key answer to your question is not to be led by bureaucrats. Be led by politicians. For example, Euro is another example. You had to have incredibly powerful political will to give up currencies in European countries such as Germany, France, for, centuries. Because currency is a very important element of sovereignty. So political decision, political leadership was, yes, we want to do it. And then you follow with necessary regulations. And I think that's a right approach. If you want really to do something, like in Argentina, you have a political leader, and it's a political will, and you just do it. So it's going from above down. While in the EU right now, what we have is we lack political European leaders. We have leaders of every single country, but it's not really a European politics. While we have a very strong and well-organized bureaucracy who is perfect and who can resolve all your problems by regulations. So you end up with projects which don't, at the end of the day, don't make sense to the people or to the businesses, because the bureaucracy is completely detached from the normal life. So it has to be a different angle. And to answer your question, yes, you can be a superpower through regulations, but only if the regulations follow big projects, big ideas.
Thanks, Margarzata. Zoltan.
Thank you. I have a good news for you. There is a new regulation at the EU for the bottle cup which correct the previous regulation of this. Yeah. So that's there's always an ongoing process. And you mentioned also this 1 in, 2 out. In the UK, they have it anyway, so they introduced and that is also a possibility. My question was also previously, I think it is useful to think about it. We have always this run, deregulate, how to can keep it. Yeah? What we need, what kind of institution we need it, that we don't have new regulation. But I think we are talking about two different things. One is how sometimes the politics is going, state capture, regulatory capture, and so on. That means politicians selling regulatory goods, yeah, for the companies. Yeah? That is one thing. And the companies are using, yeah? And also they are selling regulatory goods for the voters. Yeah? There is an exchange in it. So how can we deal with that? And the second is the redistribution. Yeah? When there is a redistribution in a very high level, that means you have mean-tested eligibility and all the bureaucracy is coming that. Yeah? So when in a country redistribution is relatively high, and to special groups you have to define the special groups who get the benefits, eligibility, and all these things. So it is rather a broader political question that how high the redistribution thing. And also you mentioned the European Union. Also in the European Union there's a huge redistribution process. So I think it is two things. One is rather in the business, how in business they are dealing with, and how how redistributive in the system, the political system in a country, how we will use it. And just one point to it, tax system and simplifying the tax system, I think the best ever what we can do it. And I'm very happy in Hungary we introduced the flat tax, which is really flat for everybody, 15% income tax and 19% corporate tax.
Thanks. Zoltan wants to reply.
I just want to add one thing. One of the problems in Europe is that every single political party and every single political leader measure his own or her own effectiveness by number of pieces of legislation they present in the parliament. This is a nightmare. This shouldn't be really a criterion. A government who doesn't propose regulations could be also a very good government.
Okay. Thanks. I think we have to cut here. Actually, your first point, I think, was nicely, entered in the Secretary of State speech, and I think it's interesting perspective that he gave to us, also in the dynamic of the reforms. So I think there is a coffee break close by. Okay, on that direction. And so I would give you a round of applause, please. And see you in 15 minutes. Okay. Okay, 12:15. Okay.